Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Salisbury will be getting a new mayor this coming November, and you're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Mayor Jack Heath has decided to withdraw from the race, leading Councilmember Megan Outen to jump into it. Also vying for the position is Jermichael Mitchell, and a third candidate is Randy Taylor, a local business owner and property owner. Also has served as a former board member of the Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Services for about 10 years and chair of the Salisbury Historic District Commission for 9. We have him in the studio this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
So, first of all, why did you decide to run for mayor?
Well, I've been in the city my whole adult life. I feel like I've been kind of preparing for this for the last 25 years. I've always stayed active in city politics, not necessarily as obviously an elected official, but I love Salisbury. I feel like I bring a unique set of skills to the table, being I was a banker for 25 years and I've owned a company the last 6. And it's primarily around the subject of housing, which is obviously a big issue in the city. What I do is I buy and rehab older properties, 1850 to 1910, restore them or resell them. So I'm very much aware, kind of a student of the neighborhoods, and so So the answer to your question is I got involved in becoming the mayor because I started seeing things that were happening that I had never experienced, meaning there was a lack of transparency in a lot of our dealings. There were things that were happening that didn't seem like it was getting the public buy-in, which is kind of what gave way to my my campaign theme, which is progress, which we can have with transparency, which means we can include the public in that process.
So in terms, by the way, of things that you saw, you've made the issue of the parking lots in the downtown development. Where are you in that? Is it just simply that there's an issue with parking lots, or you think that the entire project should be scrapped?
Well, let me start by saying, because there's a little bit of misinformation there. I am definitely pro-development. I'm a banker by profession and a builder by secondary profession. So I absolutely believe in development, and there is room to develop on those lots downtown. What I took objection to is they are basically selling all of the land lot or the surface parking in a project that really what I call is 20 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. They're asking for 2.5 times the normal density, and the existing central business district has historically depended upon surface parking as a part of their business model because they don't have their own parking. So the planning department is supposed to weigh in on that subject, which they failed to do, and they've not really made it a condition of the approval to allow the developer to go through the process to verify the density. So long story short is I'm not opposed to development. I definitely am opposed to this project. The last leg of my opposition to that project is the city has offered to build the parking garage, which is a $10 million bonding deal. And I had the opportunity to present to the council and the administration a cash flow of the income and expense on that parking garage, which showed that it would lose $400,000 a year, fully maxed with the highest rates we've ever charged for parking downtown. Not to mention that that's probably not appropriate parking for all of the people that are already downtown. That said, none of them were presented a cash flow during the process of the approval, nor did the administration prepare one. So it's that sort of thing that, again, goes back to why I'm running for mayor, but it illustrates the kind of decision-making that I think we all as taxpayers should be concerned about.
So this project is moving down the road here. I mean, there have been approvals. The city council's been voted for this thing. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that you could stop this altogether, or do you favor scrapping it all?
Well, there's a small group a relatively small group trying to ask the council to say, listen, let's put the stop to this for a moment. We've not had a parking study. We've not had an environmental impact study. We've not run the numbers as a city on the parking garage. There's a lot of missing parts. And I think what we're really doing is we're taking 5 members of the council who are really chasing a firefly, meaning that they want to follow a good project, which unfortunately I have to say this is not one of them. And at the end of the day, I think we just need to take a stop, look around, because what happens is if the developer buys the property and they ultimately don't perform or to perform at the level because of approvals or variances or need for variances, which they don't get, then they own the property. They've sold our parking to an outside party. So they need to make sure that he can do what he says he's going to do through the approval process, which he hasn't been through. He's got a preliminary site plan. That's it. And it's that sort of thinking that's causing, problems. This is why I'm concerned. This is why I'm in this race.
So, what would you do with the parking lots? Would you do anything with them at all? For instance, if this project were not in,
if it wasn't in, I would absolutely go back to the drawing board. Like I said, there's opportunity. No, Unity Square. Could we have done without that? Probably. I don't think it necessarily adds a lot of value. And I think if you talk to anybody downtown, which again goes back to the issue of buy-in, they don't think it was a big add-on, and it hasn't even opened yet. It's just sort of a block that we've already, got other spots in the city. We have those open spaces, but in any event, I think that I would go back to the drawing board and maybe deploy a urban planner to help us do more of a traditional town planning approach, where we have surface parking, vertical buildings, but not this sprawl that they're looking to do.
Because one of the things, finally, along these lines, and trying to get an idea of what it is that they're looking at, it does seem to me, as particularly as we're standing there looking at the parking lots, that what you're going to have basically is the elimination, as it were, of what we think of as a traditional downtown. That is, downtown right now is basically Main Street and a few other streets, but that's about it.
Yeah.
You're talking now about a residential area that once used to be parking lots, and now that the whole entire area is going to be integrated into a residential area, with the downtown serving really the local community. I mean, I think that's how the sense I get from what, say, Jake Day and other people have told me.
Yeah, I think that they're conflating a couple things. I think one is, there's room, and there should be we should be encouraging vertical construction with residential. And even the developer in our private meetings said, hey, we need some more surface parking. They admit that. The city's tried to come up with a plan after the fact, after we raised the issue. But this all should have been done on the front end to get everybody comfortable. Again, transparency, get buy-in, done more as a charrette rather than a race to the end. And I suspect this is going to be problematic going forward. But again, that's why I'm trying to get in the race and become mayor, so I can help guide that process.
So how do you see yourself differing from, say, the previous administrations, both Jake Day and his administration? Jack Heath, who was president of the city council during this time, is now mayor, is going to be retiring, as it were.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself differing from that past, say, 10 years or so?
Well, I mean, for example, we go back to the bike lanes and the changes to Waverly Drive and the rechange to Waverly Drive, which I think actually was done by Jack. But I think, we're trying to solve problems we don't have and kind of ignore problems that we do have on a resource basis. I mean, the only thing I would say about the bike lanes is we need more bicyclists. I mean, we're trying to, and this is not happening just here. It's happening in other areas as well, where I think there's this kind of a political popularity to try these things, when in reality, they're not really checking out. They're not really providing anything to the citizenry. For example, we're talking about doing something like that on Eastern Shore Drive, $5.8 million, a bunch of roundabouts. Yeah, I'm not saying there shouldn't be some traffic calming, perhaps maybe some lines for space for riders or for bicyclists, but we don't have to spend $5.8 million on that when we've got other pressing needs in the community.
The other thing that strikes me, particularly as we talk about the downtown development, is that there are all these other neighborhoods. The Church Street neighborhood comes to my mind because I'm most familiar with that. But there are areas of this city that have housing issues in terms of deterioration of those housing.
Absolutely.
What would you do about that?
Well, it's interesting because my first house was on the corner of Church and Truett when I first came back to college. As a matter of fact, I just recently re-renovated that same house because it experienced a fire like 4 years ago, and I resold it. And it's at the corner. If any reviewers want to see what kind of stuff we do, look at the corner of East Church and Truett. It's the 901 East Church Street. It's a great-looking project. So, Church Street is relatively the same as it was 30 years ago when I was there. When I say that from a condition perspective, I think that we could do a whole lot better partnering with the SNHS to do intervention rehab projects and purchase rehab and resale projects, which is what we did 25 years ago at the 500 block of Church Street. We started that whole process, but it just never got any grips. But we need to take a focus, and it's not just there. It's Smith and Maryland, and it's on the west side. We need to take a concentrated, long-term, big picture, strategic approach to it.
Do you see the requirement of incentives for doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, right now, particularly with rates being higher, I think we could probably get the commitments on the local banks to provide lower rates and blend those with the purchase money rates, make them, do some kind of a homestead local tax credit to keep the taxes low for the first 5 or 6 years, maybe do some rehab loans at 0%, whatever. But the point is, target those areas and incentivize those programs. You can stack the benefits, and on the seller side, do some kind of a tax credit for them to apply or carry forward on their end, so they're more motivated to sell. So I mean, you got to provide the supply by getting someone to sell, and you got to provide a buyer to renovate the house. If it's a tough area.
Because I know you've been critical of the incentives that I understand that they've been offered to the folks in downtown, but you're offering incentives somewhere else.
Well, no, that is not an incentive. Exactly. What that is a giveaway. And what I'm saying is that, look, everywhere around the city core, we're building apartment complexes with no incentives. All of a sudden, downtown, we have to feel like we got to give away the ship to make it work. And that doesn't just meet the sniff test. I mean, here's what I'd say to you is that the amount of money that we would give away, plus the loss on the parking garage, just for the Salisbury, is several million dollars. Anybody that has a use of a calculator and has been balanced their own budget could come to that. That's just not worth it. Period.
So in terms, by the way, of your experience, one of the things you said is that mayor of a city is not unlike the president and chief executive officer of a bank. And
of a business,
I would only, or business.
Yes.
And the thing that always strikes me is that no. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because when you're in charge of a mayor, for instance, you're in charge of a very large organization.
Right.
You have stakeholders who have real power and who can say no. Right?
Right.
You have programs that may not have a nice, neat bottom line defined profit, right? So in many ways, running a city that is this large, that's much different than, say, running a business.
Well, I think what you're laying out are challenges to running the city, not unlike what a CEO has a lot of challenges running a business. They're different, but they're similarly challenged. In other words, I agree. There's all those things. But to that point, very good point, I think that, and that's actually a great question. That's probably one of the best questions I've had since I've been running this campaign. The reality is, and it's what I keep trying to stress, as a CEO or a mayor, when you put together a budget, every line on the income statement and every line on the expense side of the statement is a value statement. We're saying that's important for our citizens. And what I think we've kind of gotten away from here is that we have an agenda-driven potentially administration, and then we've got the citizens that are down here. And I'd like to bring that kind of more in balance, if that makes any more sense. Makes sense?
Okay, well, you're going to get pushback from a city council which has real power and may have an agenda that's not your agenda, or they may disagree with you about expending or not expending something. I mean,
well, that's the difference.
That's a real stress, right? As opposed to a CEO which says, okay, this is what we're doing, and then everybody goes and does it.
Yeah, well, that's how it's been, really. So what I would say to you is that my case will be made. If they can disprove my case, well, then I'd be happy to acquiesce. But I think my case will be a bona fide case, and I think I can prove it objectively and subjectively.
So, by the way, how would you draw business into this community? Because that's one of the big issues that sometimes comes up, particularly for the areas that have poverty issues, for example.
Yeah.
That's not just simply a matter of housing. It's a matter of education and development, and in terms of like getting people jobs. What would you do, and what kind of incentives, as you use the word again, to bring them in?
Well, it's funny. I had a long talk with Dave Ryan, who's obviously heading up Wycomico Economic Development. He does a super job. I've known him since I've been 12 years old, and we talked at length and have talked at length in the past. So I think from a mayoral perspective, what I can do to support him as it relates to is ease the permit process, try and help with potentially special exceptions, do what we can to support what economic development, and to some extent be a referral source. If I'm at a mayor's conference and I hear about a company, yada yada, well, I'm able to refer that to him and maybe put together a conference call, maybe get him in come to town and see if we can't do something that would work for us. But I don't see the mayor necessarily as a business development guy so much as I see him as being a support person for whatever businesses are approaching the area we can bring in.
Because, I mean, that's really one of the issues that you have to deal with is the fact if you aren't out there bringing businesses in, then, you might be a partner and that's really great, but nonetheless, nothing happens. I mean, I'm thinking about, for instance, Ocean City where they have all these festivals, right?
Sure.
I know Mayor Rick Meehan is out there.
Yeah.
beating the bushes, making sure, bringing people in.
Yeah. To your point, I think I would take a little bit different approach as it relates to the downtown in terms of marketing, and I would create more like what Berlin's done, weekly support for the restaurants that like a fiddler's convention, not to copy what I'm saying, but something similar to that. Other things you could do, skateboard, events that bring in regional talent, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, Bob Rothamel, if you know him, he handled the festival this weekend, the Mayoral Festival. Been a long-term friend of mine and my brother's. My brother was in that business, so we would work together to try and fan the flames of soup to nuts, spring to fall, super events that people knew. Any Friday or Saturday night on most weekends, there's going to be something going on, small or large, and that would be a great thing for the people that are in walking distance or from people from the county.
So, I mean, because it seems to me that downtown has begun to flourish. Certainly, it started with Third Friday. We now have the Maryland Folk Festival. There are other events. I mean, it does seem as if downtown, in that sense, is heading in the right direction. Yeah,
I think here's the thing. So the downtown itself, and I've been complimentary of Jake, has never looked better. I own a building down there. I've been down there for 25 years. I was there when Feldman's had holes in their roof and they had the antique store. My ex-wife and I had a business down there for 17 years. We've got skin in the game downtown. What I guard against is this whole idea of this 20-pound bag of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. We got to be careful that we don't do projects such that it really strains the existing base, restaurants, retail, whatever we got going on, to a point where it puts them out of business. I mean, people are already talking about the Unity Square project, compromising the project for the library and for some of the restaurants locally. It's chewed up that much parking, and we're only looking down the road potentially with a Salisbury Square project or Town Center project and having the same thing. So it can really be devastating. Not that you got to have construction to have permanent improvements. I get that part, but you just can't make it so difficult for them that they go lights out for long periods of time.
The other thing that's occurred is we had a recent mass shooting that's in or near Salisbury.
Yeah.
Where some people got killed.
Yeah.
I think what our state's attorney has talked about some kind of gang war, although I was not very specific. What would you do in terms of crime? I mean, in general, Salisbury's been pretty quiet.
Yeah. I think it's been a relatively recent spike. I've got the assistant chief is on my committee, and she's been a super resource in terms of helping me understand the dynamics and the granularity and all the issues going on with crime. Two things I'd say. One, at one end of the spectrum, we've got sort of the health issue, crime / social service component, which we could do a better job of, which seems to be a residual component of the day-to-day crime. And then we've got the violent tier 1 or type crime that, assaults. And so I think we, like any city, will do what we can to try and create a safer environment. But unfortunately, you can't guard against random shootings, and it just sort of happens, and it's unfortunate. But to the extent we can fight to solve them, we certainly would do what we could, and certainly staff up fully. That would be a big start right there.
So, I mean, do you think with the guns thing, particularly with the shooting, do you think there's just simply too many guns on the streets, too many guns floating around? I mean, we can talk about responsible gun owners, but
I know.
we got plenty. I mean, I read a thing the other day, about somebody showing up in front of a governor's office with an AR-15. I mean, what's going on? Yeah,
I don't own a gun. Never have owned a gun. My dad, I think I had one, like a handgun at one time, but I mean, never been a gun guy. But at the end of the day, I think that the wrong people have guns and they use them, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, beyond that, I don't really have much in the way of a mayoral position. I don't know that I'd have a big position on that point.
So what would you do, by the way, about homeless? There's been a lot of effort done this. We had the Virginia Street, I think it was, operation. We have some other efforts to deal particularly with the vets and homelessness. What kind of investment would you make in that? Yeah,
I just spent some time at the Christian Shelter, and one of the things I put in my piece to the Daily Times was, we have experienced, the Halo, and I think it's just because of their program, they kick people out at 7:00 in the morning, and then they go everywhere in the city, and we've gotten to a population of what I understand to be about 225 rough. And they're going to Acme, and they're going to the library, and they're going in front of the Wawa. And so it creates a little bit of a quality of life issue for the rest of us because we're getting panhandled. And my take on that is twofold. Create an environment where the loitering is seriously taken seriously, number one. Number two, provide a space for them to go in order to be out of the weather, not panhandling, perhaps some employment opportunities at whatever level we can do. And again, I talked a little bit about this with Mr. Dickerson over at Christian Shelter, and he's interested in partnering on that front. But at the end of the day, I think we can do better. Let's put it that way. And I think homelessness is a little like recovery. The more resources you provide, the more demand you get. So you have to be in a position where you're providing sufficient services, but not creating an environment where it says, "Come here, we'll help," because it just never ends. It never ends. We got to manage our own population and our own of homelessness, if that makes sense.
So, I mean, do you see those services as mean that the city is going to have to spend some extra money?
Yeah, it's going to have to be part of one of that expense item on our. But I think probably that we value, that we call our values. But I think we can get away with, to a large extent, being a partner with somebody that is already in that business.
So in terms, by the way, of your vision of the city, what is that vision? And I've talked to a number of people who've run for office over the years. Yeah. And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to make sure that the taxpayer money is not overspent. Yeah, sure. And I'm going to take a look at the budget. And that's pretty much it. Jake Day obviously came in with a much different vision. Mm-hmm. You can disagree with what he did, but nonetheless, what is your vision?
Well, I mean, I think certainly development downtown would certainly be on my agenda. Again, with apportioned projects that make sense for the existing footprint of the downtown, meaning the central business district, that they're all kind of in concert with one another. Certainly, we could do a whole lot better in terms of some of our at-risk neighborhoods. Certainly, we could. I mean, we need to make that a part of our incentive, and the city needs to partner heavily with whatever resources we can to make that. Again, like I said, Church Street's been the same way for 30 years. It's been a little bit better around the edges, but for the most part, we could do a lot better. But as a general statement, I think at this point in our history, with what we've just kind of come through, I think clean streets, balanced budget. We're in. We've got our budget in tow, but we can do some really cool things. I think downtown and through the neighborhoods, I think which is our core of our town.
So people have described you as being a conservative, perhaps a supporter of Donald Trump. How do you see your politics meshing with being mayor?
Well, I mean, like I said, the first thing you got to admit, what I have to say to you is that I love Salisbury. Regardless of what my political politics are, I love Salisbury, and I think that's pretty much the big qualifier to be mayor. Much beyond that, I really don't have a lot to say. I have certain values at the national level, and I support who I think will support those values.
I mean, some people might look at that and obviously questioning, for instance, the results of the 2020 election, for example, or things of that nature. People would say, wait a minute, you all sound really good. You talk about the downtown development, but there's something strange out here if you're saying this. I mean, how do you appeal to people?
Saying what?
Saying in the sense of, say, for instance, that whether it's the 2020 election, questioning that, or whether it's a sort even of some of what's going on nationally. And so, I mean, there's people who are going to be looking at that. Whether it's
they're looking at what? Yeah, but I've never said anything about it. I mean, I was going to say that the subject of this came up in I think it was in the NAACP, or no, it was in the Democrat. Mm-hmm. They said something about I was an election denier. I said, listen, there were abnormalities that were different in areas where, prior to the prior election of 2016. I think everybody realized that was the case. That's what gave Biden the victory. What I'm saying is we went, whoa, how'd that happen? I've never seen it change so dramatically over a 4-year period. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that, but the first reaction for a lot of us were like, oh, that might have been a little bit of an abnormality. Why? It doesn't mean you're an election denier, nor does it mean Hillary Clinton was an election denier when she lost to Trump in 2016. I don't want to accuse her of that. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the whole point. Is that's not really a point. I mean, I'm a mayor. I'm running for mayor.
Well, I have to ask.
I got it.
The other thing, too, by the way, talking about the issue of the lynching of Matthew Williams, 1931. Yeah. What do you think the city should apologize?
Yeah, here's the thing on that. I've spoken to Monica Brooks, and we sort of kind of got her take on the whole thing. And obviously, I think if the city resources or city employees were involved, as a matter of course, it isn't bipartisan. I mean, it isn't partisan. It isn't. It's just. I think it's as a matter moving forward in good faith, I think we would just do a ceremonial apology. Now, I'm not saying we agree to any kind of resolution, or I'm just saying we just say an apology. Hey, listen, this was not good. It was a part of our history, and we apologize as a municipality.
So one of the things, by the way, that Monica Brooks and others have said
Yeah.
is that going beyond the apology,
Yeah.
that then we need to take a look at race relations in Salisbury to try to deal with some of the aftermath of that very long period that we saw. What kinds of things might you do to reach out, particularly the African American community, to resolve some of those inequities?
Yeah, I've talked to Shaney Shields, and I've talked to Alana Watson, I've talked to April Jackson. Here's what I'd say on that subject. I think there are a lot of talented people working in that space, to include the newest, which is the Haitian community, And listen, a lot of talented people working in that space, and to the extent I could participate and helpful and provide resources that we can manage, sure, I'd be helpful. But I mean, what is a mayor again, and me, I think there are a lot of people that are much more tuned into that space in terms of, improving that relationship, and, if we can support it, great.
Because, you are going to be not just one amongst five, say, for instance, city council, but
Yeah.
you're going to be the leader of this city.
Yes.
And whatever you say in regards to whether it's the lynching or whether it's the inequities, that's your voice is the most powerful.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, would you use your bully pulpit to do something more? Or,
Well, I think
obviously you haven't
there's been no
details in front, but
right.
nonetheless.
Yes, on the basis
your approach.
Yeah, hey, listen, if something were to happen that was race-based or a problem, certainly, I would get to the bottom of it and certainly take, whatever action needed and be supportive of but it's sort of a hypothetical I can't really address. Follow me?
Welcome to politics.
Yeah, here we go.
So in terms of the campaign, so what has it been like, by the way, on the campaign trail?
Yeah,
this is the first time that you've ever been out there.
It's been interesting, I've met a ton of people. Hey, I've met a ton of taxpayers, which is cool, and I've seen things from a different perspective. Things that I didn't really. People think about a lot of this stuff, and it's good. It's good. It's been good. Really good.
Is it different than what you thought?
A little bit. But I tend to be a curious person. I tend to talk to people anyway. So, but I've been doing it on steroids lately, so it's been good.
Okay. And any thoughts about how you would get along then with the city council? It may have a different view than you do. It's obviously got some different.
Yeah, well, we got to find out who's going to land on this next one. But of the current council, I know, and I like several of them. Some I don't know too well. But that's one of the strengths I think I bring to the table. I was in the corporate banking, and you always had people on opposite ends: the bank on one end, the customer on the other. Whatever, the attorney on the other. We brought people together, and that's a skill set that I think I can do and do well.
Because this is going to be probably one of the youngest city councils as it is now, and it's going to be even further. You're looking at this from a generation gap here,
right? Yeah, and I think to some extent, the youth's a great thing, but they're a little wet behind the ears in some regards. So hopefully we can look around corners a little bit together.
You're going to teach them something?
Well.
Or are they going to teach you?
Let me just put it this way. When I was that young, I thought I knew more than I did. That's all I'll say.
Well, we've been speaking with Randy Taylor. He's a local business owner, also property manager. He is running for mayor of Salisbury, and we appreciate you taking the time to stop by and chatting with us.
Don, I really appreciate it. Really do.
You're listening to Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.